virtualizing Windows on the M1 Macs with parallels. This is MacVoices. Today's edition of MacVoices is supported by RocketMoney. Take full control of your subscriptions with RocketMoney at rocketmoney.com/MacVoices. This week's MacVoices is supported by Kolide. Kolide is an endpoint solution that uses the most powerful untapped resource in IT, end users. Learn more at kolide.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, this time around, the MacVoices Live panel tackles an article that announces Parallels virtualizing the ARM version of Windows on the M1 Macs and what that might mean for the future of running Windows software. Let's go back and let the panel do the talking. Brett in the chat room says, I know about Netflix games from the start, but I have no idea where to go to access them or try them out. So, Brett,
there's a game tab in the
there's the mobile games. You just search games, and at the top there's where it comes up and showing on the screen here for the listeners that the mobile games are up there.
That's great.
I want to take us off topic for just a second and point out that Webb, the way you're just presenting yourself, you look like you're the boss of us. And I feel like we really need to step up our game, and this is going to reflect poorly in our evaluation.
And Jeff, you don't know that his background is actually his office.
I absolutely believe that.
Yeah. That whole building is his office. The helipad's out back.
Yeah. Anyone that wants to come into Webb's building that is his exclusive office has to get a special clearance, a special badge, and I'm assuming that there's a gift bag that you give to people on their way out, and it has like Webb trinkets and Webb merchandise and T-shirts that say "I was at Webb's office."
There's your special badge. So,
see,
yeah, see.
And the card key to go with it. So
he has such good security. He has to show security the ID to get in. So
and he is the CEO, you know.
Yeah, that's
and that's the picture I changed is the lobby to the building. So
that's very nice. That's very nice.
It's it's so humble how you say the lobby to the building when it's really the lobby to your office. The entire building, I presume, is your exclusive office.
Yeah, no. So
yeah,
he did point to a particular window and said, "This is my office."
Yeah. It's me and 499 other people. So,
but do they all work for you?
Yeah,
I hope so.
Wow.
Brian,
you know how many people work there? About half of them. So
yeah.
So it's a government job.
Oh boy. Okay, let's see. Who else can we offend tonight?
Yeah.
Brian in the chat room says, sound like this may be a marketing issue for Netflix. Look how long it took a group of people who are dialed into tech to know where and how to access these games. That's a really
to be
good point.
fair, this launched last year. This isn't a long-standing thing for Netflix.
No, I think Brett's exactly right. Or Brian.
Yeah, that was Brian. Because Brian,
I think this is a huge fail on Netflix's part.
Oh, yeah. Even if you look in that help article we shared under available games, it's a short list of games.
When Brett shared in follow-up on the chat room, I'm going to have to download the Netflix app since I normally do all of my Netflix watching on Apple TV. So you would think with all the ads that Netflix runs about, all the other content they have, that they might have just mentioned somewhere we have games.
I wonder what percentage of Netflix users are watching on a mobile device.
Well, if you count iPads, I do a lot of streaming watching on my iPad.
Yeah, and now we're going to see if I can find stats on that.
Well, again, while Jeff's looking, I wanted to ask Webb and Eric, since they're our guests here tonight, anything you all have seen in the news or anything that you've experienced recently that you'd like to bring up and talk about? Because I shared, a story of mine earlier But I think every week it seems like somebody has had some hiccup or some issue or some resounding success. Anything come to mind for either one of you gentlemen?
There is something that I saw today. I can't tell you where I saw it, just somewhere on my homepage when I fire up my browser. What's the future life of the Mac Studio? I've bought 2 of them, one for myself, one for my wife. I really like it a lot, and I got the Apple, not the HDR display, but the Studio display to go with it, and it's had its quirks, including the firmware update that just was announced. And the sound, I'm not sure if you're in or know about that or not, but I'm trying to understand what the hardware path is now for Apple. My office computer right now is a trash can Mac Pro, and I'm one of the few people that like it. The downside is that it's approaching 9 years old right now, and I need to move on to something else. And the most recent Mac Pro that's out right now is that the way that thing's priced and configured, I got to get committee approval to make that purchase because it's so expensive. So I'm just wondering what this professional level is. I have a MacBook, and I do like that. In fact, this one that I have right now is one that I got last year, and it's the best laptop I've ever had. Battery life is incredible, for example. But I'm trying to figure out trying to predict what Apple's hardware strategy is between the Mac Mini and the M2 chip. Maybe there's going to be a Mini Pro, and then where's the Studio fit? There's going to be a Mac Pro of some kind down the line, and then on going down on the other side, there's the current iMac, which I view that as more as a consumer machine as opposed to a business machine. People could argue that either way. But anyway, does anybody have an opinion? I'll start with they came out with the Mac Studio. Does it have a future?
I am happy to prognosticate, Webb.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so here's my take. The Mac Studio, Apple could have released as the Mac Pro if they had chosen to go down that path because of the horsepower it has. They didn't, so that tells me that what they're going to release as the Mac Pro is going to be just absolutely bonkers.
Yeah.
So as far as where does that leave the Studio in the mix? Well, you tossed out the term like the Mini Pro. I think that even though that's not the name, I think that's ultimately where the Studio fits in the mix, where you have the mini form factor ish with much higher level features than you would get from a standard Mini. So I think it's going to stay in the mix, and we will not see a separate computer called the Mac Mini Pro.
Seems like a good analysis. Mac Pro is probably also going to have a bonkers price.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, Webb, it's so funny that you brought this up, I swear, because I had this on my list of articles to discuss, and I'll throw it into the chat room, into both chat rooms right now, talking about the Mac Mini M2 might be released, but that there's no Mac Mini redesign on the horizon. And I kind of go with Jeff. I guess what it all comes down to, though, for me is how much computing power do you really need, depending on what you're doing. And I'm not suggesting that the Mac Studio is overpowered for you, Webb. But do you think you could?
It is. I'll admit it. It is. So.
Okay. Yeah, and that's why, because I feel like you could trick out an M1 Mac Mini right now, or even an M1 laptop with an external monitor and a bunch of connectivity, a really decent Thunderbolt dock, and you've got yourself a monster machine. And so, at what point do we? We've had this discussion before, but at what point do we say the Mac Pro is for the real pro with a capital P that, is rendering out, hours and days of video and, doing, 500 layers in Photoshop. And Jeff, I don't know what I'm talking about, so correct me if I'm wrong, but, kind of the people that are really, that are really pushing this hardware to the edge, and so I would turn to both of you gentlemen and say, and everybody here, what do you want to see in a machine that we don't already have or can't, with a reasonable expenditure, equip it with?
I'm going to not answer your question directly, and instead use it as inspiration for where I'm going. Because hey, you're not the boss of me.
I like to be inspiring, Jeff. So go for it.
And you are. Okay, so let's look at the Mac Pro, and we have the average computer user who literally doesn't care and probably doesn't even know that Apple has a desktop computer that has Pro in the name. I think the Mac Pro is going to not address them on any level, of course. I think for most of us, it's not going to be a product that addresses us either. And the media is going to flip over that and just write the most scathing articles about Apple because Apple didn't cater to them specifically. Instead, I think what Apple is going to do with the Mac Pro is take this and position it as a machine for the really high-end people, So these are people that work at Industrial Light and Magic and DreamWorks and Pixar, Disney Studios, the places that need hardware on a scale where even like serious pro users, as you're saying, doing 500 layers in Photoshop or Illustrator, it's going to be beyond what they need. And for everyone else, Webb's Mac Mini Pro, the Mac Studio, is going to be more than enough. I have looked at some of the files that I have created over time, and I can push the limit of a Mac Pro. And I'm not saying that as a brag, just, hey, look at this. I can bring a computer to its knees. I guess I am bragging. So if I were doing that all the time, every day, a Mac Studio would be more than sufficient for those needs. But if you want me to make graphics for Iron Man 7 or whatever we're up to, Guardians of the Galaxy 3, I would want more than that. I would want the kind of machine that when you turn on the power to it, the lights in the room dim and then have to come back up. That's the Mac Pro that I want for that stuff.
Okay. Brett in the chat room says he wants to see a redesigned tiny Mac Mini that's powered off the Thunderbolt cable from the studio display and has performance specs similar to the current 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro lines. So that would be...
And a pony?
Pony.
Yeah, I can't comment on the power off the studio display, but you have to wonder. Well, I guess there are obvious reasons. They're not about to put those higher powered M1s in the Mac Mini because they want to sell you a studio. So that makes a certain
the computer that he just described, that has a code name and it's iMac.
So for us, most of our users were using 27-inch iMacs, which you can't get now. And then many of our users aren't actually sitting at a desk in an office, they're working remotely. So people started switching to laptops. And we had them before, but the laptops were more for going to conferences rather than surviving 24/7. So they've been using the new laptops that have been coming up for purchase have been the 14-inch MacBook Pro, and the Apple Studio pretty much matches that for performance. It's the first time really that we've seen a desktop machine and a laptop machine where it didn't really matter which machine you were on as far as how you felt while you were using it. There might be a difference in the display size, but the speed of the machine and functionality of the machine has been good in both places. We still have a few people that for conference use or whatever, they want the smallest, lightest machine they can get. The MacBook Air worked really well for that. Some of our more active users hit limits with the M1s when you open lots of browser tabs. You hit a point where all of a sudden the machine just becomes unresponsive. We haven't hit that with the Apple Studio or the 14-inch MacBook Pro. So that's kind of what we lean for, except for the case where we know the person's really only doing a couple of things on the machine or they're bothered by noise. The reduced power, that has been a noticeable difference for us. The fact that I could notice on my power bill if I had 2 or 3 27-inch iMacs at home and I was, compiling and building stuff, it made a difference in how much I paid at the end of the month. There isn't a 27-inch iMac now, but the Apple Studio fits that. But we did try the new iMac, and one of the tests we did with that was to take Milwaukee Tools M18 battery, and they have a little adapter that's got 2 outlets and USB and USB-C connector on it. Plug the iMac into that and then ran off of that for a day. And it worked. That to me, that just has been amazing. The speed was good. Not quite as good if you wanted gazillions of browser tabs, but just the fact that I could treat an iMac like a laptop, I found to be really impressive.
That's actually really cool.
That is.
Yeah. This edition of MacVoices is supported by RocketMoney. Start canceling your unused subscriptions and save money at rocketmoney.com/MacVoices. Are we in a recession? Are we not in a recession? They keep changing the definitions of a recession. But at the end of the day, if you're spending money and not getting the benefit for it, you're losing money. If for no other reason than that, you have to check out RocketMoney. They help you manage and cancel subscriptions you don't want, need, or simply forgot about with just a tap. Sound familiar? That's because you've heard me talk about my favorite app, Truebill, before. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Truebill is now backed by Rocket Companies and just changed their name to RocketMoney. Why? Well, for one, Truebill has grown from a bill management app into a full-on personal finance empowerment tool that helps over 3.4 million people with budgeting, lowering bills, canceling subscriptions, and more, saving each of their members, on average, $700 a year. Bottom line, RocketMoney is everything I've loved about Truebill, but with a fresh look and feel. Start canceling your unused subscriptions and save money at rocketmoney.com/MacVoices. That's rocketmoney.com/MacVoices. Thanks to RocketMoney for supporting this week's MacVoices. Today's MacVoices is supported by Kolide. Kolide is an endpoint security solution that uses the most powerful untapped resource in IT, end users. Old-school device management tools like MDMs force disruptive agents onto employee devices that slow performance and treat privacy as an afterthought. Kolide does things differently, though. Instead of forcing changes on users, Kolide notifies your team via Slack when their devices are insecure and gives them step-by-step instructions on how to solve the problem. For IT admins, Kolide provides a single dashboard that lets you monitor the security of your entire fleet, whether they're running on Mac, Windows, or Linux. That visibility makes it easy to prove compliance to your auditors, customers, and leadership. And by reaching out to employees via a friendly Slack message, Kolide can help you build a culture in which everyone contributes to security. You can meet your compliance goals today by putting users first. Visit kolide.com/MacVoices to find out how. That's Kolide, KOLIDE.com/MacVoices. Thanks to Kolide for supporting this week's Mac Voices. So let's talk about a large 27-inch iMac with an M chip in it, M1, M2, whatever. Does it make sense at this point? Because, Eric, what you're talking about, it's, to my way of thinking, for most people, the studio display is going to be overkill. And Apple's already been accused of, they're making me pay for something that I really don't need. When it came to the 27-inch iMac, I don't need this gorgeous 5K display. Do I want it? Yes, but do I really need it? No. So is there a case for that integrated computer at this point, or is it better to? For some of us, you go out and you either buy a studio display or you just buy a phenomenal 4K, or you get an ultra wide like Jeff has, and plug it in because that's what'll fit your use case. Or do you force somebody to go back and say, this is what I'm going to buy, and I'm going to pay the freight, and it's going to be the nice integrated package?
The Apple Studio really, that it does enough. If you want the iMac experience, you can get the Apple display and get pretty close. It's a little bit pricey, but for the most part, all of our users are sitting on a machine for 8 to 10 hours a day. They're hanging on to their machines for between 4 and 6 years. The cost of the display doesn't really matter over the lifetime of the machine. It's how much stuff you can put on the desktop. Do they have any eye strain? Can they get their work done, and are they happy at the end of it? And that's more important than it's $1,000 or $1,200 for a display versus $600 for a display or $400 for a display. As soon as you hit 6 years, it doesn't seem to matter a whole lot. That being said, being able to have a bunch of displays that can be used with a Windows box or a Linux box or a Mac, and you get the display that you need for your task, as opposed to, we have all these machines with 27-inch machine displays, and you get that, or you get a laptop and plug a display in it. I think at the moment, I'm finding I prefer the flexibility of the Apple Studio. It gives us a lot more options for people that might switch between operating systems. That it's a lot more doable. There are a lot of people crying at losing their 27-inch iMacs and saying, well, can I just use this as a display? And as we swap it out with something and hand them a completely different display, there's not, they're not really happy. There's not really anything we can do about it. So I guess I'm kind of looking forward to having better display options, more flexibility to adjust. Somebody needs a wide display, they get that. They change their minds and they switch cubes, and the cube doesn't have the height. They can switch to a smaller display, or 2 side-by-side displays, or 3 displays, and can that just work the way they need to? So,
anybody else have thoughts?
I think the all-in-one market still has a valid place. What Eric was saying totally makes sense, and in his work environment and a lot of other work environments, that's the ability to have that flexibility with pairing a computer with a display versus having the all-in-one. I can totally see where that's a necessary thing. When I'm looking at the consumer space, What most people want is the ability to open up a box, set something on their desk, and there is no step 3. They just want to plug in and go. And the iMac is so perfect for that. I mean, we're at the point now with the iMac that the only cord you need is a power cord. And if Apple could figure out how to make it work without you having to plug it in ever, they would be all over that. It would be step 1, take it out of the box. There is no step 2. And they would pay Jeff Goldblum good money to do that commercial too. So for us, the serious users, there's a good argument for splitting apart the computer and the display. But the consumer space, education space, man, having that all in one, it is just like a perfect mix for so many people.
There's been quite a discussion going on in the chat room, and I'm just going to try to paraphrase couple points. But Brett was saying that an M1 Mac Mini works fine for him. That he does some Final Cut, some what was it? Creative Cloud, Logic Pro, and that the point behind him wanting a Mac Mini is that he lets him invest in a 27-inch display and then just upgrade the Mini portion, the Mac Mini, as it's needed.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like we're all over the place here because I'm sitting in front of. I'm not even sure what vintage this iMac 27 is. It's an Intel, and it does what it does for me. So there is absolutely no reason to upgrade it. And I was able to connect a secondary monitor to it as well. And I sometimes wonder, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. I think the current 24-inch iMac will drive a second monitor. So could that be a solution, if you think outside the box a little for a setup like, forgive me, I'm not sure if it was Webb or Eric was saying it, a 2-monitor setup where the iMac is not necessarily your main monitor. Maybe a very nice high quality 4K is, and then you have a 24-inch off to the side. And you have an M1 chip.
I bet there's people with that setup right now.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, we've got a couple of people that are using that setup, and they seem to like it at home because you have the option of having the second display, or you just disconnect it and have more space on your desk. At work, a lot of people seem to want a larger display. That's not enough. Although we do have a certain number of people that are using the iPad as the second display. And so it's an iPad and a laptop in one spot, and a laptop in a very wide display or much larger display in another spot, kind of depending on where they're going. So yeah, there's kind of a lot of experimenting going on right now, and people haven't really settled in for what they're going for.
Do we have any feeling for what, how do all-in-ones sell on the Windows side? I mean, Apple kind of invented the all-in-one in a way. I think when, the iMacs, nobody else was selling those machines. Now, there are some all-in-ones, but, my sense in the past was that the PC market was all towers with an external monitor.
HP, I'd have to go and look and see what they're offering now, but there's
they definitely offer it, but how do they sell?
Hard to say.
I don't know what current numbers are like, but they were selling really well. Their pro level business workstations, the all-in-ones, sold pretty well. But don't think of it like an iMac, because they were thick, and you would lay them down and their handles, and you would pop it open like a briefcase. And then it has all the components in there, just like a desktop computer, but built into a really fat display. So you can do upgrades and part swap outs and stuff And for the business all-in-one space, that Z series all-in-one from HP, at least a few years ago, was a really popular option.
Dell does have their Inspiron series. They have 24 and 27.
Oh, I forgot about the Inspiron.
Yeah, so they do have that, and it's an interesting market because I've had experience where we've had all-in-ones, and I've worked with all-in-ones in the past, and they were very beneficial when you do a lot of training, and like a training room, having a machine that's easy to set up a room. I can go back to when we used to have Gateway all-in-one desktops back a long time ago, and I was setting those suckers up, and we buy all these machines, and I think we probably set them up like 3 times in the whole life of those machines. So, but I think, in the consumer market, Inspiron is considered the consumer market for Dell. So, they're not bad machines. They have 27 and 24-inch models. So, I mean, and they're touchscreen too. So, people who like to have touchscreen in the Windows world, it's there. But it's interesting. I think with Apple, the 24-inch, I think, is a pretty popular seller. You don't hear too much about it as much as you had when it first came out. I'd be interested to know what those numbers are, but obviously Apple never shares that information. So, but you never really. To me, I'm just the one monitoring the news all the time, talking about the all-in-ones. You don't see a lot of discussion about all-in-ones these days.
Okay, here's the funny thing on all-in-ones for me right now. I just went to HP's website to look at the all-in-ones, and the whole page renders out, with the banner across the top, Intel Core processors, blah blah blah, and then the tabs for the different computer formats. And I've clicked on all-in-ones, and it's just blank. So, yeah, well done, HP.
This Mac Voices live panel wraps up in the next edition of Mac Voices, where we talk about running Teams natively on the M1 Macs and why that might or might not be a good idea, the concept of dedicated Microsoft Teams machines, and a few other things. That's next time on Mac Voices, and I hope you'll join us. Until then, and as always, I'm Chuck Joyner. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with Mac Voices magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.